So this panel is going to be headed by Robert Kinn, who has worked with the Office of the Secretary of Defense on the Afghanistan program in telecommunications and information for many years. He is a loyal member of the Afghan-American Chamber of Commerce. Bob has been very active in previous panels, in our previous matchmaking conferences. So let's welcome Bob Kinn to the moderator's chair. Thanks.
Thank you, Don. I'm going to put this glass down here. And welcome to everyone, to our Afghan colleagues. Salam, tashakur, manana. We greatly appreciate the efforts made to come to Washington. And we are going to try to move quickly to compensate for some time lost in prior sessions this morning. So I will go breeze through my slides as quickly as possible and be available along with several other members of the panel for a one-on-one discussion this afternoon to go into further detail. Can I have it next? Okay, this is just giving you an idea from on the DoD side. What has recently happened is we had a telecom advisory team called TAT at the bottom, which reported to DISA, which reports to the DoD CIO, which goes into the the Deputy Secretary of Defense. The TAT was located at ISAF headquarters, Kabul, and was shut down as part of the drawdown on the military in October. A remnant contracting organization that used to report to TAT, IZ Technologies, is now reporting into the J6 at ISAF, and we maintain lines of communication across these organizations. That a small group that remains in country will be there till the spring, and it remains to be determined what the department may or may not do following the closure of that group. Next slide, please. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on the bullets here. The idea is basically to get across that this has been an 11-year effort of advisory engagement in country across various organizations at DoD. We began at the embassy until 2008. We were in a period of transition ourselves as the surge moved, and then we relocated from embassy to ISAF, where we have been since 2010, again until just this past October. And now, of course, we remain in contact with ISAF and the J6, looking at the way ahead in terms of what advisory capabilities we may be able to provide going forward. Next, please. Really on this slide, I just want to focus on the top bullet, and that is so often we have people saying, why would you want to provide advisory support to one of the most successful sectors in Afghanistan? We say, you're thinking about the commercial side, you all. And they are doing very well, fine, thank you very much. They do not need advisory support. However, the advisory support that we've been working on is targeting the civil side of the government, the Ministry of Communications, ATRA, Afghan Telecom, et cetera. Next slide. And here are just some quick statistics which we have from this past summer on the private sector side. You can see the success of the mobile companies and the ISPs, growth into 3G, foreign direct investment. Next slide. This is giving you a quick look at how areas of focus have been brought by DoD and ISAF to the Ministry of Communications, looking at cybersecurity, fiber, spectrum, and support with ANSF communications. Next slide. This is taken directly from the Ministry of Communications website and gives you their statement as of this week on what is the vision for the future of the MCIT working within Afghanistan to make Afghanistan an information society. And then it's giving you the quick overviews about remote communications, internet, support of national identity card, working further on the fiber network, and movement to digital TV, and improving the regulatory stance of various aspects of engagement. Next slide. So this is really the money slide, and from a policy perspective, what is going to happen going forward? Minister Senghine just stepped down a few weeks ago. Engineer Hassam is now the acting minister. He was the deputy minister for technical, meaning that he was the person who presided primarily over the actions of Afghan Telecom in expansion of the fiber network while taking on other responsibilities. We, of course, are waiting to see what the new administration will signal, hopefully in the next few weeks, if they stick to the schedule they're talking about by end of December, to see who will be a replacement minister, what kind of signals come out from that minister about how he may change the ministry and the various organizations reporting to in it, such as ATRA, Telecom Regulatory Authority. Will it be promoted to be more independent of the ministry? What will it do in terms of regulatory review, in terms of satisfying interests of the private commercial sector that remain outstanding for a number of players? And I'm sure Farhad will be discussing that. What will happen with the future of Afghan Telecom? Might it be partially privatized or fully, TBD? And obviously what happens operationally with further expansion of networks? And that's, of course, getting into the fiber infrastructure and regional partnerships. And I've put in blue there the reference to New Silk Road and RECA, the Regional Economic Conference for Afghanistan. And the next slide, please, which is my last, which is actually a segue for introducing Lou Shadle from our team. The work that we've been doing within the US government and JIROA on promotion of digital Silk Road, New Silk Road. In the case of the US government, there's an interagency working group that I am part of that looks at infrastructures and programs tied to New Silk Road, begun by Secretary Clinton and now picked up by Secretary Kerry, for regional cohesion, looking at key infrastructures, one of which, of course, is the fiber network ability to look at both cross-border connectivity improvements and then integrating that with broader regional capabilities. As you look beyond the region, Lou will be discussing various options for possible interconnection on various different routes. The world, of course, in the big picture has changed quite a bit in terms of where there may be preferential routes to connect to. The basic concept, of course, being that you have major transcontinental east-west routes, the land route, and major east-west routes on the submarine cable, and looking at a north-south connection between those. So I will, at this point, hand it over to my colleague, Lou Shadle from Deloitte. Several people on this panel, along with myself, have been working in various aspects of telecom advisory capabilities from US government to particularly the Ministry of Communications. Lou is a key player in that. And Lou, thanks for picking up from here and talking more about the private sector interest in the fiber.
As Bob mentioned, I'm Lou Shadle. I'm a senior ICT advisor with Deloitte Consulting right here in Washington, actually in Roslyn. And I had previously spent about 2 years working on a telecom advisory team that Bob mentioned in Afghanistan, in Kabul, primarily focused on the promotion and the development of the core ICT infrastructures in the country. Now, it would be the fiber infrastructures, microwave networks, and working with the private sector and the MNOs on cellular infrastructure development as well. You've probably heard it if you've been in these sessions before, especially the one with former Minister Senghine. The ICT story in Afghanistan is an unbelievable story. I was with him here a couple of years ago when he went around to various organizations and he presented the case of ICT. And the people in the audience were saying, are we talking about Afghanistan? You know, how could these numbers, how could this amount of development, how can $2.5 billion of direct foreign investment apply to Afghanistan? You've got to be talking about some other country. It's not the case. The ICT story in Afghanistan is the single, at this point in time, the extractables may usurp this 10, 15 years from now, but the ICT story in Afghanistan is the single greatest success story that exists in that country. And I'm very proud to be a part of that because of what ICT brings to the population, to the country, and to the culture. In an earlier discussion I had outside, I was reminded of a incident that occurred earlier this year, not an incident, but a sort of an image that it created earlier this year after the elections. Because of the penetration of information and communications technology in Afghanistan, in particular the cellular networks, and the ability to now in Afghanistan use 3G technology, your cellular technology that allows for mobile broadband connectivity, i.e. walk around with your cell phone, have access to the internet, which means you have access to social networks. The image that occurred after the elections in March of this year on Facebook in Afghanistan, the most prevalent image that was being shown on Facebook in Afghanistan was selfies of individuals standing up, holding their finger up where they had dipped it in the ink to vote. Selfies of individuals taking their own picture. And even more significant, the greatest majority of those images were of women, Afghan women. Now just think about that for a second, what that means, both the men and women aspect of it. Here's people that are able to, and not afraid to stand up, show themselves that they have voted, and to do it in a medium that touched the world. They were now part of the world. That's the beauty of information technology, or information and communications technology in Afghanistan. Now let me transition into the sort of the meat of this. Next slide, please. This is a graphic I began putting together probably back in 2010 as the Afghan fiber infrastructure began to sort of coalesce. It was starting to show real meat, that there was fiber in the ground, that there was operations running over it. At that time, the coalition, the military coalition, was using a tremendous amount of that fiber. But they needed more, and they wanted more. And something that started to show was the nature of Afghanistan in its geographical position in the world. It actually sits in a sweet spot between the trade and financial markets of Western Europe and the trade and financial markets of the Far East. And today, those markets, those developed markets, are served by fiber which is undersea based, as depicted by that light blue line on the bottom of the graphic. And there are some problems with that, in particular Egypt. There are 10 cables that run across Egypt today, up in the top center, left center, that are subject to cuts daily. And this has become a big concern for the Tier 1 operators and the consortiums that own this fiber. And I won't go into it in depth, but in a previous time, working in Iraq with a similar situation, we were able to use that fear of running across Egypt because of political instability, terrorism, because of civil works cuts and so forth, to find a route that went through Iraq from the Al-Fa Peninsula in the south up through Zakho, Turkey, and into Western Europe, that is currently being used as a bypass route around Egypt when there are cuts in Egypt, and which again happen every day. So now if you look at this from the Afghan perspective, you see that a similar situation can exist, a similar opportunity that can exist in Afghanistan. As Afghanistan's infrastructure begins to mature, and as the operators begin to offer better and higher qualities of service and and it can offer SLAs or service level agreements that can be sort of internationally recognized. The routes running from the undersea cables at the Port of Karachi, where there are 4 undersea major cables that terminate there or pass through there, the opportunities to route through Afghanistan as a hub of what we coined as the ICT hub of Central Asia. Afghanistan provides a distribution mechanism that will, at some point in time in the near future, be very robust and very resilient. And it will connect the northern neighbors of Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Turkmenistan, to low-cost IP connectivity, internet connectivity, from the Port of Karachi, where it can be purchased at a very, very low price point. And it can be used to service not only Afghanistan and the domestic markets in Afghanistan, but it can also serve the domestic markets in the tremendously underserved areas of the southern and northern stands. Let me just mention some of the economics. The cost of transit today, or the cost of IP traffic in Afghanistan today, is about $300 per megabit per month if you buy it in bulk. If you were to do the same thing in London or in New York, you may pay as little as 6 cents per megabit per month. So you can see the opportunity to reduce costs and extract those costs out of it and increase penetration in this underserved region of the world. And hopefully see many more anecdotes like I gave earlier with the finger at some point in time all throughout the region, which doesn't happen very much today. Let me quickly switch over to the next slide, which is where Afghanistan sits today relative to its fiber infrastructure. And the takeaway from this is Afghanistan's fiber infrastructure now represents something in the order of 2,600 kilometers of operational fiber that's generating over $90 million a year for Afghan Telecom. And it serves not only the international community, but the multinational operators as well. Afghan Wireless, Roshan, Etisalat, MTN. They are buying more and more of this fiber to backhaul their traffic from their cellular networks, which represent over 5,300 towers. Keep that in mind when you're thinking about construction opportunities. The towers will need to double to service the entire population. That's a lot of towers that can be used, it can be built by large and small construction firms. The promise in the future is that the ring will be completed, and I would encourage my ADB colleague to kindly get the contracting on the northwest route going again, because we can't close the fiber ring unless we have a road to route it through. With that, I'm going to end. And
I'm sorry to cut you off.
That's quite okay.
Lou is a wonderful resource of information, and hopefully you have a chance to talk with him after the panel.
Yeah, I'd be happy to take questions later, sure.
Thank you. Okay. I will quickly introduce my colleague, Mr. Fahad Ghafoor, who has been involved with the AACC for many years and joining ICT panels. He is from Rana, one of the key ISP providers in country, and I'm sure we'll hear a very interesting perspective from the ISP community.
Try my best, thank you. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Honorable Don Ritter, Chairman Sulaiman Lutfi, thank you so much for inviting me. خوش آمدین افغانای عزیز ما از افغانستان سفر کردین به امریکا. امیدوار هستم که سفر شما چیزی که توقع داشتین همه تو بخیر شوه و میوه بسیار مزه‌دار از نقطه نظر بزنس به دستان بیاید. We are here to make business and create opportunities for all of us to make more business, directly helping Afghanistan and United States of America, creating jobs and exploring opportunities and taking risk. That's what we all do. Don't you agree with taking risk, especially working in Afghanistan? You agree or you don't agree? Agree? Are you willing to invest in ICT sector? Haven't you heard enough? You're not excited? It's before lunch? Well, let me share some good news with you. and you don't have to take my words for it. What we have to do at the Afghan-American Chamber of Commerce and at the Chamber of Commerce in Afghanistan is to put pressure when folks at very high levels make promises and commitments to creating jobs and business and opportunities for us to indulge in and risk our lives. You know, we're living in Afghanistan. Every day we leave home. By the time we come back from office, we're not sure if we're going to make it alive or not, but we're willing to take that risk. So we have to take these gentlemen or ladies for their words, right? We have to put pressure. We have to lobby to make sure that they live up to those promises. So let me, and I know time is short, but let me share some good news in addition to what you've heard from the rest of the very distinguished panels and distinguished panel here, and the gentleman from ADB that got me very excited. So let me go to my first slide, please, and let me try to read this because these are not my words. I don't want to make a mistake. Hello? This is Secretary of State John Kerry speaking in London conference just a few days ago. He's saying that I'm pleased to report that the United States and Afghanistan have agreed to improve private sector links between our countries by issuing visas that will be valid longer and will allow for multiple entries for eligible business, this is the keyword, business travelers, students also, exchange visitors, and tourists. And someone from the State Department, you guys check this out. These are not my words. So next slide. Then he goes on and says, my friends, we have a government in Kabul, which is the unity government, with a CEO. It sounds like a corporation, right? The president and CEO. That merits our confidence. This is United States confidence and our support. And never before has the prospect of a more fully independent and sustainable Afghanistan been more clear than it is at this moment as we assemble here in London. So pay attention to these words. This is the Secretary of State of the United States of America speaking. Next slide. And he also goes on by saying, he talks about building this powerhouse. Our colleagues on our panel talked about the hub. And we heard from ADB and from other folks that, so the vision here is that U.S. is seeing to supporting a powerhouse which will involve Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India. So this speaks volume. This gives us a lot of promise to go forward. I know I have 3 minutes. Next slide, please. And by the way, did you hear about the Afghan Bruce Lee? You did, right? Where did you hear it from? Facebook, right? He put a selfie of his, and then he became very famous. And it is true, we have Bruce Lee living in the body of Abbas Hazara, who looks just like Bruce Lee. He's very handsome, very fit, and he jumps like 6 feet up in the air. And I saw him on Facebook. I shared his pictures and information on my fan page. You're welcome to go and visit and learn a lot about him. And by the way, Facebook, YouTube is open in Afghanistan. Facebook, YouTube is shut in Iran. The 50, 60 million people of Iran have no access to those things. And also in Pakistan, YouTube is blocked. We have 3G in Afghanistan. We don't have 3G in Pakistan yet. So there's a lot of, I talked about other stuff, but this is an ICT sector, so let's go over ICT. We have a lot of assets on the ground. This is why we're talking about this, is to give you confidence that there's, if you want to venture any business, if you want to start any business in Afghanistan, we have the means to get it done from an ICT perspective. Over $1 billion investment in ICT. We have a fiber ring, national fiber ring around the country. It's almost done. It's already operational, but some parts of it's still under work. We have a high capacity microwave network, just like we have here in the US. We have, Afghanistan has its own satellite called Afghansat. Next one, please. We can install VSAT anywhere you go in Afghanistan in all 34 provinces with no problem. They have companies that can help you with that. There's both 2G and 3G GSM. We have a national data center to host very complex networks. We have Wi-Fi, WiMAX, and all other sorts of wireless internet access, you name it, it's there. And we now have a more trained workforce, a more willing workforce. In 2002, that was a very hard commodity to come by. But now we have a young generation that are willing to take on any task that you want them to. Next one, please. So what are the investment opportunities in Afghanistan still? We still have room to grow internet penetration. Right now it's sitting around 20-25%, so there's another 75% left for US companies to invest in. And with the Afghan partners, we have an opportunity to work on e-government. We're still doing a lot of things in a non-electronic way. So that's a huge opportunity. The government has a plan for that, but the private sector can come and do that. We have distance learning, telemedicine, vocational training, capacity building, and information transit from a hub model. Slide, please. All right, so my conclusion is that Afghanistan's security and US security is interwoven. Once we establish security, which will bring economic prosperity, we will also have security in the United States of America. There's a lot of investment that's been done. There's a lot at stake. Afghanistan must be a success story for the United States, and it has to be worth the investment in terms of lives, in terms of billions of dollars that's poured into that country. We cannot just close our door and walk away. And there's a lot of different models that still need to be addressed, one of which is that where the trouble, the most problematic region in Afghanistan is, which is the southern border between us and Pakistan, that's where there's practically no economic development. And guess what? When there's no economic development, it feeds into poverty, it feeds into terrorism. So instead of sending drones, that's my personal opinion, you guys want to agree to that, by creating more enemies, we could send more money and invest and build the infrastructure along that border. So through economic development, we could bring peace. Economic development bring peace. Peace brings economic development. Thank you so much for your attention, and wishing you all the best. And once again, thank you.
Always an interesting perspective that you bring to our ICT panels year after year. Thank you very much. The program shows that we have a representative from Afghan Wireless. Unfortunately, he was called away on business travel and was not able to make it. He sent his regrets. So we'll move on to our next speaker, who's Larry Wentz. Larry has been, like other members of this panel and myself, members of advisory efforts with the ministry and other organizations in country. He is with National Defense University and is a treasured asset of the U.S. government at NDU. Thank you, Larry.
I'm not sure about the treasured asset, but I was asked today to give a little overview on some of the opportunities in the ICT sector, and some of this will be duplication of what's already been said or reinforcing what's already been said, but let's move on to next slide, please. I think the important thing to remember is you really need to treat information communications technology as an essential service. It has to be treated just like you treat roads, power, water. It is the glue that ties everything together. And it's also a critical infrastructure, so you can't just put it in, you have to protect it as well. And that's physical protection as well as cybersecurity protection. And in the end, it is the agent of change. I mean, if you want to change, this is the way to do it. And you can see that today if you go out to the universities in Afghanistan, which I've done, and see the young students with their laptops surfing the net and understanding what the rest of the world's like. And that's making a change in their mind. And you can see that in some of the young students who now were much more interested in the elections and put groups together to try and understand how they could help make a change. So the future of Afghanistan, in my mind, is the young and the women. I think if you really focus on improving their education, their access to information technology, you're really going to make big changes. You can see some of that happening already today. Next slide, please. Okay, we beat up the infrastructure quite a bit, but if you don't have infrastructure, then you can't run social network, social applications. You can't do other things that you'd like to do to support other sectors. So the infrastructure is extremely important. And as you can see, from just 2010 timeframe to today, tremendous progress has been made. Look at the voice coverage. Went from minimum coverage, reasonable, to pretty much 90% of the country is now covered by some form of mobile service. If you look at the fiber network, it's growing. It needs to be expanded into some of the other provinces, but it has a pretty good coverage now, and that's going to bring the broadband services you need to do the various networking functions you'd like to be able to do. And in May, that was my last trip to Afghanistan, was May, they activated the digital satellite capability. So there's now digital satellite TV. That opens up broadband services. That opens up the opportunity to get coverage into rural areas that is hard to get to nowadays. Next slide, please. So the point is, the infrastructure is there. It's growing. It's being modernized. And now, how do you take advantage of it? And in many of the other sectors, it is being taken advantage of. Agriculture is using it for pricing information, using it for understanding where the best opportunity is to sell their products. It's now in mobile money, which was mentioned earlier. You have other industries that support the telecom sector now. So you can have companies that are manufacturing or putting together computers. You can have service industries that are providing technicians. You can have capability to do education and training. So the thing is, it's a very rich environment now to take advantage of this infrastructure that has been put in place. As was mentioned earlier, there's a national data center that's being activated. If they put cache servers in, then that opens opportunities for content providers like Google. You can put the Google Maps in country instead of having to go out of the country to a server somewhere else in the world to get Google Maps. So there's lots of opportunities there. And in terms of extending governance, there's efforts like the what they call the DOSNet, which is basically tying the ministries together, hopefully trying to put extension of that ministry capabilities to the provincial level, so you get the provincial capitals and then down to the district capitals. And so there's an effort now to move this capability from the central government down to the district and hopefully to the village level someday. Education, that was one area I've been working quite a bit in the last couple of years, working with the universities, looking at computer science programs, looking at programs for developing chief information officers. I mean, you're now moving into the information age, and so you need some of these capabilities. Cybersecurity is a new effort that's on the horizon, and so developing the capabilities within the universities and other training centers to provide education and training in the cyber area is very important. Let me go to the next slide. I'm trying to keep you. 2 minutes. I'm 2 minutes? Okay. So none of this comes for free. And as you look at the crystal ball, I am a little bit concerned about security. I know in the keynote speaker felt it was a little bit better than I think it is. I think we have to really be careful, and we need to be able to help the Afghan National Security Forces in terms of providing the security needed, because if you don't have the security, then all this good work that you've put into the infrastructure is going to disappear, because the Taliban do burn down towers, they do blow up facilities, they do kidnap workers, and you need to keep that under control. And that depends on economic and political stability. And one of the problems, you're going through a political change now, so that's going to have some unintended consequences as new leadership takes a hold. And electric power has always been a problem, and that really gets to be a bit challenging as you get into the rural areas. Again, although the workforce is getting better skilled. There's lots, the bench is still pretty thin in terms of managers, people with acquisition capabilities, the technical skills. Cybersecurity is one area where the skills need to be developed. And you're moving into the information age, so you have to develop an information culture and make more effective use of the infrastructure and capabilities available. And this all comes down to the willingness of the government and the industry and the people to take advantage and leverage what's been put in place. And in the end, I'm betting on the young and the women to really make a change for you. So,
You're right on the mark.
all right.
Thank you, Larry. Larry has been such an important member of the effort, both with DoD and interagency, for the last decade in the work he's done. The slide he put up where he mentioned essential service and critical infrastructure, this is a challenge for the U.S. government as well as for the government of Afghanistan. We have an understanding about how that works for the U.S. government domestically, but what a lot of work we do at the DoD-CIO and with other organizations is how do you get that recognition of ICT as essential service and critical infrastructure recognized at the NSC level for activities outside of the United States, whether it's humanitarian assistance or conflict or post-conflict settings. So it's a very important point that Larry raised. And finally, on that point, we were very pleased to be able to support Minister Sengin back in 2007 when he had ICT recognized as a critical infrastructure for the government of Afghanistan. And then, as I referenced in my slides, we've been working cooperatively between the U.S. government and JIROA through the Regional Economic Conference, the RECA process, which about 2 years ago also gave ICT recognized status as a key national and regional infrastructure. So these were very positive developments. So I'm going to move on to Mr. Farid Abbas, who has been a colleague in the work we've been doing going back to 2005, when we had a different organization at the Pentagon doing a advisory support. And thankfully, Farid was also able to come back to Kabul and be a member of the Telecom Advisory Team a few years ago, and has been a key player in a lot of these activities. Thank you, Farid.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Thank you, Bob. Well, Afghanistan in the information society of the 21st century transition to transformation. I got this from a report recently released from an analytical group in World Bank talking about the transformation period in Afghanistan 2015 and through 2025. And next slide, please. Well, a lot of the information that you see here has already been presented, so that means that we are so in tune with one another because we have same information. And what I would like to say, Afghanistan in the globalized digital society. The digital society is so global, and the phenomena of globalization of the internet has been a phenomena, and it's moving forward so rapidly every day. So I would like to briefly talk about that, and then the challenges to compete in a global economy is in a globally connected world, and the opportunities in the ICT as an enabler to other sectors. Next slide, please. Well, this information has already been presented to you, but you know, as you can see, it's really nothing new. I would concentrate on my optical network utilization, optical fiber ring utilization later on. Next slide, please. Challenges. We have, although a lot of work has been done in the sector, and it is a very successful sector, but there are a lot of challenges in the sector. Regulatory reforms to better govern the cyberspace, well-defined and implemented cybersecurity strategies to safeguard integrity of information passing through the networks, and standardization of operation processes, process management, and professional support system. I changed the color on the last bullet because I would like to talk about that in a later slide. Next slide, please. Well, the opportunities, as you can see, it's already been spoken, that transient traffic passing through Afghanistan from the 5 neighboring countries that we are already connected to, seeing Afghanistan as a digital hub for ICT and content delivery, as Larry mentioned earlier, caching information locally for the local consumer as well as our neighboring, and then also opportunities in application development for government, e-commerce, and education. Those are opportunities that there are multiple contracts on building apps for the government and for the ANSF and other entities in Afghanistan. Next slide, please. Well, this is one, the highlighted bullet that I had earlier is I am a member of the Society of Afghan Engineer. Society of Afghan Engineer was founded in 1993 by a group of Afghan-American engineers in Northern Virginia that has chapters all over the United States and over several hundred members in the United States, Canada, Europe, and Afghanistan. Society of Afghan Engineers has sister organization in Kabul and has been involved in helping the Afghan government and Afghan institution in building capacities, codes, and standardization on multiple levels. This is because the Society of Afghan Engineers has got subject matter experts from every sector of the economy: construction, roads, water and sewage, mining, and all engineers from all sectors. I guess at the end, I will end at this slide and thank you for your time. And no, that's good. That's good. I'll thank you for your time.
I didn't mean to cut you off, Fareed.
No, that's good.
I gave him a 2-minute warning, not a 0-second warning. But thank you, Fareed. Fareed has been such a valuable member of our activities going back to when we were a direct report to the Secretary of Defense through Reachback office based at Pentagon that Fareed was involved with, and of course his work over the last years with our telecom advisory team in Kabul and back here in Washington. Our final speaker, we've mentioned that this telecom advisory activity has, of course, been focused upon activity with various entities in Kabul, be it the ministry, ATRA, Afghan Telecom, vendors such as our friends from Asia Consultancy Group, a wonderful company doing wonders in country, the MNOs, the cellular operators, and the ISPs, of course. The interagency engagement at embassy with state, USAID, and commerce has also been balanced by interagency activity back here in Washington. And our final speaker, Joe Cattuso, is from the Commerce Department, and he's with the Commercial Law and Development Program. And Joe has worked for a number of years, both in Kabul and back here. And I do want to acknowledge in the audience Mr. Charlie Seiner in the back, who has also been working for many years through Commerce's International Trade Administration with their Afghan task force, and they have been able to work closely both with each other and with the interagency group back here in Washington. So thank you, Joe, for sharing time with us on CLDP and issues tied to cybersecurity, which cross from both the public sector to the private sector.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am honored to be here, and I want to thank AACC, Mr. Ritter, Bob, and everybody for inviting me to join this panel. I am honored, and I'm also perplexed that once again in my career, I am the last speaker before lunch, a coveted position to be the person who stands in the way of lunch, and I've seen your lunch come by. So Bob knows I'll be quick. I will endeavor to do that. I'm looking at Fareed. It'll be hard to be as quick as Fareed. But in just a couple of minutes, I'd like to talk about what my office does and what we've been working on and will continue to work on with Afghanistan. As Bob mentioned, I'm with the Commercial Law Development Program. Joe Gattuso, again, is my name. I am an attorney with experience elsewhere in the Department of Commerce, and I work on ICT issues for CLDP, the Commercial Law Development Program. The program, it's much broader than just ICT. As a matter of fact, most of the work at CLDP is not on ICT issues. It's on matters such as arbitration or development of mining laws or energy, training law students, things like that. And yet there's lots to do. There's lots to do in the area of ICT. I've been working in Afghanistan for about 2 years, and we plan on staying for a while longer. Now, one thing I think it's important to mention is that even though I'm with the Department of Commerce, and I hope you're not too disappointed, I'm not the same office as the commercial office in Kabul. Many of you know Walt Koenig, Tom Munzberg, continuing to do their work there. They are very engaged in the business community, doing different things. We just pointed out Charlie Seiner in the audience with the Department of Commerce Afghan Task Force, working with Sue Hamrock and others for many years, working on issues. I'm in a third office. I'm literally located in this building, and what we do is we provide assistance to help with the legal environments in the countries we work in. We do programs involving experts who usually donate their time to come in and advise on laws or on doing training for people. And I was trying to think of what the importance of our work is. Fortunately, the speakers have all covered the basics of telecommunications and why it's important. I think what it comes down to are three things. Maybe I can think of a fourth. One is opportunity, one is confidence, one is competency. In telecommunications, there's got to be an opportunity given. First of all, there being telecommunications and information access. Another is so the next Bruce Lee can be on Facebook, things like that. Confidence comes that makes things like cyber security a commercial issue because people have to have confidence in their information. And that's people, that's organizations. Lou talked about the fiber possibilities. That's only possible if there's confidence that the law is going to protect the data that's flowing through there. And thirdly, competence, and this goes to our training programs, that this being telecommunications is generally a regulated area. The government is always going to be involved in any country, and you want to know that the people that are doing the jobs are competent to do that job. So when I made the rounds in 2013, looking to what we could start with as our first programs, one of the things we came up with was helping with the basic laws. There had been and still is an ICT law pending since 2008 or so that had a number of provisions, and it hadn't gone anywhere, but they're important. One of the most important parts of that law was cyber crime, and we've been working with the Council of Europe, with the Ministry of Communications and Information Technology to develop a draft cyber crime law based on that draft, bringing it up to date, first of all, with what's currently going on in the area of cyberspace and bringing it within international standards so that the Parliament, perhaps next year, could consider a cyber crime law. Also, from within the ICT law, there are a number of provisions in the old draft law concerning e-transactions, e-signatures, how people do business electronically, which is important both domestically so that you can have the benefits of telecommunications and information within the country, but also working internationally with other countries. And again, we were able to use an expert from an organization that's a UN-affiliated organization called UNCITRAL to help them redraft that law, and the ministry has put it out for public comment. We hope to continue working with other aspects of that law. We expect to be working on the law as it goes through the process. We also will continue a training program that we started last year for employees of the regulatory agency and also with the ministry to help them build their basic competences. And from there, we have another of other possibilities, but as I mentioned, we're relatively new in Afghanistan. For me, 2 years, for the office, about 4 years, but we plan on continuing. We have support from USAID and our funding, and we hope and expect to continue to develop more programs so that this sector can continue to be the success that it has been so far, and that it provides even more benefits. And I think that's really pretty much all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it, Joe. And obviously, the key takeaway, I think, is that what is being done in the public sector to improve cyber activities is very important to the commercial private sector in terms of how business is done both within Afghanistan and the expectations of partners outside of Afghanistan to be able to do business with an expectation of a playing field that is considered acceptable on the cyber plane. So we are at the end of our panel. I don't know if we have time for Q&A or should we move on? That's fine. We appreciate that. Again, we will be available to talk with you in the one-on-one sessions this afternoon. And thank you for your time and interest.
Thank you very much to everybody on the ICT panel. One of the best success stories in Afghanistan. Truly, we're very heartened by your briefings today. I want to make another pitch. So our planning now, we're going to have our quick half-hour Washington policy update with some updates from the London conference and from Capitol Hill. Following that, we'll be breaking quickly for lunch. We'll have a shortened lunch break today. We'd like you to grab lunch and then come back into the room. And then we will start hopefully back right on schedule for our afternoon panel. And then we'll start our business matchmaking. The business matchmaking sign-up sheets are filling up quickly, so be sure you check today for those as well. And thank you guys very much. Appreciate it. Okay, if we could ask our Michael Phelan and Jonathan Carpenter to come on up. We're going to do this panel basically seated, and so we don't have to use the podium to make it a little easier on everybody. Our goal is to provide an update on the key issues that are going on right now in the economic relationship and maybe look ahead at the next 2 years. The administration will have 2 more years, and then following that, there'll be a new administration and a new president in Washington. I want to thank first Jonathan Carpenter, to my right, from the U.S. Department of State. Jonathan serves as the Deputy Special Representative for Afghanistan and Pakistan. Prior to assuming his current position, Jonathan served for 3 years as a Senior Economic Advisor and the Special Representative for AFPAC, Afghanistan, Pakistan, at State Department. He's also a career Foreign Service officer. He's previously served on professional staff of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, where he worked with Senator Lugar on a number of issues related to the Middle East peace process, the Libya conflict, and a host of others. Michael Phelan, to my left, is a senior professional staff member currently of the minority, and for Afghans, that's our Republicans, so right now are in the minority. That will change in January because they just won the Senate in the election that occurred in November, so he will soon be the majority senior professional staff member responsible for Afghanistan starting in January. Michael has served as an Afghanistan expert on the staff there for some time. He's been to Afghanistan multiple times. He knows about the state and USAID relationship with Afghanistan extremely well and tracks a lot of the ongoing activities there, and we're very honored to have both these guys here with us. Just for ground rules, because I know we have a lot of Afghan media here today, Michael's appearing today, but not to represent the views of the United States Senate, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, any particular senator or member of the committee. He's here in his own personal capacity, and we're appreciative of that. If there is some question or an issue with regard to you'd like to use a quote or something that he said today, you're going to need to ask him that directly, either following the panel discussion or give him a call at his office, and he'll be happy to talk to you, I'm sure. So, context. Let's just offer a little scene setter context, if we can, on Afghanistan. So the economy is I wouldn't call it struggling, but it's now shifting and transitioning into a private sector-led economy as opposed to an aid-dependent economy. U.S. public perceptions, for a lot of our Afghan guests, you may not know this, but if you've been watching TV here, you'll understand, most of the American public has kind of a singular view on Afghanistan, and most of it's negative. They think of everything as being high insecurity, a lot of attacks, a lot of Taliban problems, corruption issues, and so forth. But in truth, the Afghanistan private sector development that you're a member of and participating in is dramatically improving, especially in key sectors like mining, extractive industries, ICT, as we just heard from that panel, and agriculture, among others, and construction and infrastructure as well. Just to remember, I think it's always important the context. From '78 to 2002, Afghanistan was completely destroyed by 25 years of war. Millions of Afghans had died. Millions had fled the country as refugees. The per capita GDP was $180, which put them at the lowest ranking of all countries in the world. Their human development capacity was low. Their education levels were low, except for those that left the country and went outside to study. Women were not allowed to be schooled or to go to work. From 2002 to 2014, with the support of the United States, our allies, and other organizations, Afghanistan undertook perhaps the largest, most dramatic reconstruction of any nation in history. By 2014, Afghanistan's per capita GNP has now reached $687. More than 8 million children are going to school nationally, with 40% of that 8 million being young girls. The decimated education system now has 17 universities. It has over 200,000 students, both in elementary and secondary schools, and they're now fully operational. The Afghan healthcare system has dramatically improved. Life expectancy has now risen to 42 years in 2000, from 42 in 2000 to now 62 years of age, a dramatic increase. In addition, women are now seen as integral to the new economy and to the society, and the successes of a lot of young Afghan female entrepreneurs, several of whom are here at our conference, we're very proud of, and to see them here. The reduction of foreign aid, though, now, and the transition that we're going through over the next few years is going to mean that you in the private sector are going to have to do and carry a lot more of Afghanistan's growth and responsibility for that growth. You have 17 banks now in Afghanistan. Electricity access is improving, but it's still very difficult and not unified. There's new and reconstructed roads and bridges. There's greater mobility around the country. But there's still a lot of deep problems in the social welfare sector. But multilateral and bilateral partners, represented by USAID and others, have committed to maintain support to Afghanistan for those social welfare components through 2017. We just heard from the ICT sector, and I want to just make sure you capture today a couple of things that they didn't say but were in a previous ICT report that the AACC put out. In March 2014, the World Bank reported that communication services grew in Afghanistan 55% in 1 year. They continue to grow at the fastest rate consistently of all sectors over the last 10 years. Afghanistan now has 50 internet service providers, 2 million internet users. There are hundreds of ICT companies that are now being driven by young, educated Afghans who want to make a difference in their country. Their mobile cell phone service now covers 90% of the population. They have 27 million paid subscribers, 22 million cell phones currently in operation within the country. And what I'm very happy about, 8 out of 10 Afghan women now have access to mobile phones for use. In 2001, it was 0. So that's a dramatic increase, and I think really a tribute to the ICT development sector and to a lot of the people that helped to make that happen, Bob, and your team, I know especially. So from the perspective of what AACC would like to have going forward for Afghanistan from a policy standpoint, we have 6 basic recommendations that we've been talking about for the last year. First is we'd like to see more Afghan products, whether they be raw minerals or other products, added to the U.S. GSP treatment list. This is something that USTR is already looking at and may be able to do. Secondly, we'd like to launch a bilateral trade agreement negotiation with Afghanistan, separate from Afghanistan's WTO accession, which the administration is already working on very hard. We know that. Thirdly, we'd like to have completed a bilateral investment agreement to allow U.S. companies to participate in Afghanistan. Fourthly, we'd like to have a U.S.-Afghan tax commission formed so that there can be a bilateral tax treaty. Every major country that the United States has grown its economic relationship with needs a tax treaty, and it's usually one of the first things that's undertaken. That way there's clarity, because investors, especially large corporations, will not invest unless they know the tax treatment on the profits that they'd make. Fifthly, we'd like to keep working with President Ghani to help fight corruption within the commercial sector especially, and I know many of you have raised that issue since you've been here. And then lastly, AACC would like us to help fix the visa issues. As you saw in the London conference, they made a major announcement from the Secretary on that. We are so happy to hear that. A lot of you know the trouble and the difficulty you've had to travel here for this conference, or if you've come in previous years, you know how hard that is. This should make it a lot easier for you to come, to meet U.S. companies, and to have the kind of business discussions that you want to undertake. So let's launch now with our two respondents today. First, we'll start with Jonathan. He's going to provide us a quick update on the London conference from an economic policy or private sector standpoint, and just some opening remarks. You can use that one or this one.
Thank you very much, Jeff, and thank you to everybody at AACC for having me back. I think this is my third or fourth time here over a few years, and I note that it's grown, I think, in both scope and thoroughness, and I just congratulations, Congressman Ritter, for all the work that you've done here with your board. I bring greetings on behalf of Dan Feldman, the special representative. I'm sorry that he's unable to attend today, but I'm glad to be here on his behalf. And I wanted to spend a few minutes, I think, just do three things. First was to do sort of a quick but sober assessment of where we think the economy is. I think that's largely already been done. I'll add a little bit to that. A snapshot of what I think is particularly relevant here at the end of 2014, the London conference, and maybe just a few thoughts on what's new and the implications for us moving forward and how we view this. So first, I won't add much to what Jeff has already offered on the economy, and I would be loath to tell Afghans in particular anything about your own economy. It's not a wise position to take. But I'll tell you that as we think about this, the talking point, the approach we're taking to this is to reflect on the gains over the past decade as being very real and very impactful, but not yet sustainable. And as we think about how we approach the economic situation in Afghanistan, as we think about our assistance, as we think about the policy choices that we're making, our focus now is to work with this new government in Afghanistan and make these very real, very substantial, very important gains in the economy, in the social sector, in education, in health, and everywhere else that USAID in particular has been fundamentally important to make those sustainable. And that initiative, sustainability, it must be Afghan-owned and Afghan-led, right? It must be driven by the private sector. It must be driven by government reform. It cannot be done from the outside. We have a role in that, but it cannot be done by us. I'd say one other thing, and that is, in support of sustainability, we have dramatically changed our assistance program in Afghanistan over the past 3 or 4 years. I won't go into it. I think Kath Campbell's been here, others from USAID, but a much stronger emphasis on the foundations for long-term growth, on investments in foundational economic infrastructure like the electricity network, foundational investments in agriculture, in transport, in trade, efforts to improve access to markets through reforms in the customs administration. And I would say one area where we've had real trouble, and I'll come back to in the opportunity section, is in the financial sector. So where are we here in the end of 2014? So I'm just back from London, which from our perspective was a very strong conference in support of Afghanistan. I would say most importantly, President Ghani and Chief Executive Officer Abdullah, over the course of a week in meetings throughout Europe, demonstrated in both their statements, but also in their personal regard for each other, in their interactions with each other, and how they approach the international community. They demonstrated that this government of national unity is working. We had real concerns going into the conference that the lack of a cabinet might distract from that message. It did not, I can say to you. And I think across the board, international donors and Afghanistan's international partners took great confidence from what they saw in the presentations from President Ghani and Chief Executive Officer Abdullah. This government of national unity has built confidence, and it has done so in a rather remarkable way. So you'll read a lot, you'll hear a lot, particularly in the United States, of a focus on appointments and cabinet members and the like. But if you think about what this government has accomplished in just the less than 2 months that it's been in office, and on the international stage, that is, engagements in Cardiff, Beijing, Oslo, Brussels, London, trips to China, to Saudi Arabia, to Pakistan, a strong statement of reform delivered to the London conference. It's quite remarkable what's happened and how much this government's been able to accomplish, given its very real capacity constraints. And I don't know how much, I'm sorry I haven't been here for the whole conference, but if you have not pulled down and looked at the government's document that it produced in London, I strongly encourage you to do so. You don't need to read all 30 or odd pages of it. You can look at one paragraph, paragraph 8, if you have to look at just one, that demonstrates how this government is approaching these issues, the kind of sober, realistic, practical approach that this government is taking, and which I think donors in particular in London responded very well to. So let me talk about, for maybe one more minute, sort of what's new here and where we think this is going. First, we see in this new government both increased capacity, a new approach, and measurable action already taken. On the capacity front, let's just be clear. This is a president who knows economic development, who's focused on it, and who prioritizes it. So in conversations that we've had with him from the beginning, obviously issues like security and the security transition at this moment have been a focus, but in every single conversation, the economy, the role of the private sector, the role of U.S. assistance and other donors is prioritized. And I would say, in doing so, the president has undertaken and has delivered a message of Afghan ownership and Afghan responsibility, the likes of which we have not previously seen. And I think this is something that we can all take great confidence in. And it's manifesting itself already. So, for instance, the progress that has been made on a regional energy grid, particularly with regards to the CASA 1000 project that we've talked about for years, was a direct result of President Ghani's instructions to conclude a pricing agreement with Pakistan. And I heard the president say quite clearly to a group of regional partners in London, I heard the president say, we put aside short-term, Afghanistan, put aside short-term rent seeking in support of long-term energy interdependence and economic sustainability. I mean, just think about that statement for a moment and what that means for you as business folks, as you as investors, for us as policymakers dealing with Afghanistan. It's quite remarkable. I've already made reference to the London document. Again, I think the approach is one of kind of sober, credible Afghan ownership. And in addition to the CASA action, I would note action on Kabul Bank, action quite quietly but quite significantly on anti-money laundering, counterterrorism, finance through the Financial Action Task Force, the invitation from the president to our Treasury Department to return technical advisors to Kabul to support the financial sector. These are very real, very positive changes. And again, this has all happened in the first few months. And I would be remiss here if I didn't talk about the importance of Afghanistan's engagement with the IMF moving forward. Again, fundamentally a relationship that was broken just a few short months ago, but is now very robustly on track. Okay, I will spend, sorry, that was one, that's gone on. Mike, yeah, let me just do real fast before I hand it to Mike. I would like to close with one thought, and that is, you are going to hear a lot about both the military transition and 2017 and the drawdown and all this. Let me state very clearly, the United States, through the generous appropriations supported from Congress and supported, in a smart way by people like Mike Phelan, has made available to the United States, still in our pipeline, significant assistance. We are planning for long-term sustained engagement in Afghanistan. We have resources at our disposal that we will deploy over the next few years. and on the basis of a more sustainable, successful approach to build on and make durable these gains that Jeff already articulated, we're confident that we'll be able to go to Congress and seek further appropriations to support this economic engagement. All right, thanks. I'll stop there. Cheers.
Okay, Michael, so give us Congress's, or at least your perspective on where Congress is feeling that Afghanistan's at now, and then what kind of concerns do you have looking forward maybe the next 2 years, and anything you'd like to add in on current policy innovations?
Thank you, Jeff. And Jonathan, it's a pleasure to appear here before you. Thank you to AACC for inviting me. This is my first visit to the conference, but I've followed it over the years. Let me first say and echo what Jonathan said about the London conference. There weren't a lot of practical outcomes from the London conference. There had been some expectation built up prior to it that it would be something more, but I think there was sufficient outcome on an optimistic outcome to say it was successful. It remains to be seen to what extent the donor community recognizes that optimism and reflects it in their continued support across the spectrum. Afghanistan is still a long way from independence from its partners. And long before the ISAF and the U.S. got involved in Afghanistan directly, they had been working their way through it as well in the midst of war. So we stand here today with Afghanistan in a far, far better situation than it was before, but with the prospect of going in either direction. And I think from my perch in the staff on the Hill and my observation over the last 12 years there, that it can go in several directions. I think it's important to acknowledge the statements that the new government has made, the efforts, obvious and quieter agreements, to identify areas in which they can work together, and they must work together in order to leverage the opportunity that they have right now. But they have to continue to show that publicly. They have to continue to build confidence, legitimacy, privately in conversations with their partners and with the Afghan officials and the Afghan people. So the campaign, which was a remarkable campaign across Afghanistan by the candidates, in fact, that in some respects must continue. Informing the population, informing the constituents and those interested in investing, both directly at home, locally in communities, and investing more broadly nationally. That conversation should be encouraged to continue. The last government in Afghanistan didn't see it as a priority. I'm pleased to see that this government has begun its engagement with different sectors of Afghanistan, either directly or through video conference, as I understand it. It has engaged directly with neighbors to encourage investment and positive relationships. It has gotten in return, I think, very positive responses. All of this plays into how the U.S. Congress perceives the opportunity and the opportunity cost or the risk involved in continuing our very close engagement. There are also other things that will influence the congressional perspective. Right now, in our own committee, yesterday, there was a discussion about the authorization of use of military force. This is a complicated, complex, and legal discussion, but it's also a very important strategic discussion for us as we seek to address our own national interests in the Middle East, in Iraq and in Syria, and the threat of Daesh. We believe that that can influence what goes on in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and it's even been threatened in India. So none of those governments can be complacent about that security threat because they see the virulence of it and the capacity it has to really hobble governments and their efforts towards development. It is akin to the Ebola crisis in bringing everything to a screeching halt, reversing all gains. I think it's important to remember that the U.S. is engaged in other areas. It's engaged in Iraq and Syria, and there's an important element of why Afghanistan remains in the talking points. It's because there is a precedent that some see that what happened there several years after the U.S. departure could happen in Afghanistan. There are plenty of arguments on either side why it's less likely to or more likely or as likely, but it's important to consider. There is the commitment of resources to the millions of refugees associated with the Iraq-Syria crisis, the ISIS war. There is the situation of the negotiations with the international community and Iran. There is the continuing belligerence of Russia in its sphere. And these are all having a decided influence on U.S. attention and drawing, as we've seen in the supplementals that have just come through, the supplemental appropriations, a significant amount of resources, somewhere in the neighborhood of $5 billion for Ebola, another several billion for the ISIS fight. So it is drawing significant resources. The drop in oil is significant because it has such an impact on our interests and others. But it also goes to policy decisions on energy around the world, including policy decisions on energy by governments, not just the private sector, as we've seen in the South Stream from Russia. So I raise these to caution you that the attention that has been spent over the last decade on Afghanistan is not a perpetual attention span, and it is normal for us to reorient ourselves to other crises, especially the headline crises. Not to wish crises upon you to draw us back, as it were.
Of course not.
But that's what some in the more stable parts of the world say. What do we have to do? Get a terrorist or a nuclear weapon to get some attention? So I think this conversation that took place in London, the positive developments and advances made by the new government since its formation, and the prospect that it presents leaves things wide open, and Congress will look for the next steps, the ensuing steps, the formation of a cabinet, the next steps in addressing the corruption, be it the Kabul Bank issue or other elements, the ability of the national security forces to continue to gain capacity and capabilities and continue to warrant the confidence of the international community in sustaining that and maintaining the kind of influence you'll need to maintain a stable and secure environment for investment. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions that.
All right. One point I want to point out. Yesterday, the Secretary hosted the Kazakh Foreign Minister, and as a result of that meeting, Kazakhstan committed to a sizable increase in a scholarship program to educate 1,000 Afghan students at Kazakh universities. He agreed to push for the Kazakh-Turkmenistan Railroad and the Caspian Seaport and to continue working closely on Afghanistan in this regional hub concept that AACC has been pushing. Is there anything there, Jonathan, you wanted to let these guys know about from a private sector standpoint?
I think all I would add to that is that, in fact, the idea of broadening the the opportunities for trade has been a priority for this new government in its first few months, and it's something that we've been trying to encourage ourselves. You'll hear us refer to the new Silk Road, the Asian roundabout, but regional ownership of these challenges is important to us. The Kazakhs have been leaders in the region on this, and we appreciate that. And I would be remiss if I didn't take that opportunity to say that one of the quotes that was not put up by a previous speaker from the Secretary's statement was his reference very positively to the improvements in the Afghanistan-Pakistan relationship. And any of you who do business in Afghanistan likely bring goods or goods through Pakistan and know that improvements on that relationship could have quite fundamental impacts on the Afghan economy. And one of President Ghani's first trips was to Istanbul. And they've made, as I said, important gestures, I think, here that we would like to encourage. Thank you.
I'd like to thank this excellent panel. Michael Phelan, we look forward to your being in the majority. That's great. And Jonathan, as a previous respondent here, excellent panel giving us an idea of the big picture, the relationship between the government of the United States, Congress, and the Congress, administration and the Congress towards Afghanistan. And I guess the bottom line is where everybody is waiting to see how, given all these wonderful first steps and statements, how the execution phase goes beyond the proclamation stage. And that will impact tremendously on the response of the United States Congress, who are in the final analysis responding to the views of the American people about Afghanistan. So I want to thank our panel for their tremendous work. Thank you. I want to make sure that after, we're going to break for lunch now, and our guests are certainly welcome to share in lunch. I want to make sure that all of you know that a very important panel is coming up, and that's the extractive industries, parenthesis, mining and energy, is going to be after lunch. And so don't disperse. And then, of course, we have our one-on-ones, which give you an opportunity to speak with our panelists and speakers in a more personal and proprietary way. So let's break for lunch. Thank you.